Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. My guest today is wonderful. She is running for the Board of Education in Zone 3 in San Ramon Valley Unified School District, has a ton of experience from different school districts, which is really interesting because, again, as we all know, diversity of thought and diversity of process leads to usually the best process in the end, and just brings a very caring and interested and engaged voice to the conversation, which I really appreciated. But I'll let you decide. I enjoyed it tremendously, and I know you will as well. Without further ado, the woman, the myth, the legend, Laura Bratt.
Yeah, so I grew up in northern Wisconsin, and there's four of us in my family, four kids, and my younger sister and brother were adopted when they were infants, and they're biracial, and we lived out on a farm in a county where they were probably two of maybe 8 minorities. And we had moved up from, we had lived in suburbs of Chicago and St. Paul prior to that. And when I was in 4th grade, we moved to northern Wisconsin. And I had this, and I know my sister and brother had it. I mean, for them, it was, I'm sure, incredibly, in fact, I know it was bizarre. But for me, kind of standing on the outside and not really fully understanding that they were any different than me. They were just my sister and brother. And,
Right.
And we had been in schools and communities where, and my parents had, we were part of like family groups, gatherings where there were a lot of multiracial families and that kind of thing. And so it just didn't seem like they were any different than me. And then all of a sudden we're in this place where, kindergartners are looking at them and saying things to them. And I'm just like, what?
What's happening
I'm
here?
confused, and just
Yeah.
didn't have, and back then, you didn't really, I certainly didn't understand racism or understand any of those things, but I remember standing next to my sister and just being so confused and so sad and frustrated, but didn't have the skills to be able to do anything or say anything. We were all kids,
Sure.
and it was looking back at it now, it definitely set the tone for how I look at life, and so anyway, so I love my family, and my siblings are all, so then I have an older brother as well. We're all completely different. I remember we had all been home for like a Thanksgiving after we'd all, flew the nest and were doing
Sure.
our jobs in college and stuff. And we came back and we were at a bar playing pool. And each one of us played pool, approached it in a completely different way. And my sister she just, shot and everything, and she gets 3 in at once, and but then the next time balls are flying, across the bar and stuff. And my younger brother.
That sounds like me. She and I would be good partners because I would be like, well, we play the same. Like, I thought I was supposed to pick it up and just throw. I know.
Right.
Okay, whatever.
Right. And then my younger brother, who has always been very life. It's been rough in some ways, but in other ways, everyone loves him. He was always coordinated. He's this affable, just wonderful man and a wonderful kid. And and things are easy for him in many ways. And so he would just go up and he, blasted us all and played very casually and just kind of that,
God, there's nothing more frustrating
Yes.
than playing pool or bowling. Ironically,
Yeah,
both of
it's the
them,
same.
both of them have
Exactly.
cigar and cigarette smoke and beer involved. But like
Exactly.
bowling and pool, when somebody can just walk up and make the balls do whatever the hell
Yep.
they want, there's an anger that
Yep.
comes out of
Exactly.
like this deep
Exactly.
well in your belly.
Exactly.
Yeah, I
Exactly.
actually have I have 7 adopted siblings, so I'm one of
wow.
11.
Oh.
Yeah, so I was the
Yeah.
youngest of the first 4, and then my dad, when I was 15, my parents had gotten divorced. They got remarried. He got remarried, and he started adopting. Again, kids as infants. He and my stepmom both worked at a hospital, so literally when somebody would come in with no intention of taking home the kid they were about to deliver, they would call my dad and my stepmom. And man, talk about crazy Thanksgivings.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
have like 10, 11 kids hanging out. It's a little bananas. But the concept of biracial it has always been so odd to me because I'm Mexican. But I mean, so my dad's 100% Mexican. My grandfather immigrated from Mexico, and my mom's white. And the nuance of like well, are you Mexican or are you biracial? And I was like, what do you mean by, like, aren't we all a little bit,
Yeah.
you know, like, there's no, like, who's Malfoy, right? Like, where's the dude that's, you know, like the albino white person? I mean, unless you live in Norway or something. But the point is that it's so funny to me that's still a distinction. And people do make it a distinction because it's so funny. I don't know. It's interesting how people want to play off of these labels, but then they also don't want labels at the same time. But you're kind of like, aren't we all just people?
Yeah. No, I agree. I think because for me, from my perspective, I'm Swedish, and I'm my great grandfather and mom's. But
did you eat pickled herring growing up?
No, but lutefisk we had, although I avoided
God.
it. Yeah.
How
But
was
herring-
it?
Well, it's just really briny and acidic and salty and.
I love it. I love pickled herring.
Oh, yeah.
I
so,
can't help
yeah.
it. I've never
Yeah.
had lutefisk, but like pickled herring, there's something so evilly delicious about it. Like, you give me a saltine and a piece of pickled herring, people look at me. They look at me exactly as they should, which is like, what the hell are you doing? Like, I can't help myself. I don't know. Well, don't judge me.
Yeah, well, and it's a high nutrient food, which is good. High
Look
protein.
at that, man.
It's
Look at that.
Low carbs.
Yeah. So you're running you're running for the vacated seat in Zone 3.
Yes.
Yes. Why? I mean, that's it's not an inconsequential. I mean, here you are with headphones on and a microphone talking to me. Like, look, I enjoyed the conversation so far. Don't get me wrong. You're probably not here just for fun. So, what's causing this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely out of my comfort zone with all of this, but I have 4 kids, and early on, and we moved around a lot when they were younger too. And we had lived after my oldest was born, we moved to France. And we lived there for about 3 years, and I had 3 more kids there. I don't know how that happened.
Wait,
but
you have French citizens?
No, because in France you can't just be born there. You have to live there for a certain number of years and be integrated into the culture. But my kids are Canadian and American because my husband's Canadian. So they do have dual citizenship, but it's not.
You know, there are some things the U.S. does well, and saying, hey, if you're born here, you're American. And I appreciate that.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Continue,
Yeah.
please.
So when we were there, my oldest they start public school at about 2.5, kind of when here you would start, your private preschool, right?
Sure.
And so I had that year of him being in school, and it was interesting because it was a totally different way of. I mean, it was different. It's a different country, different way of doing public school and stuff. And then we moved to, and so that and I've always been interested and engaged in kind of new things and learning things and stuff. And then we moved to Delaware. My kids were in preschool. The older one started kindergarten, first grade. And that was my first experience on a PTA board and that kind of thing. Then we moved to Southern California, SoCal, and South Orange County, Laguna Niguel to be specific. And we were in a really big school district, Capistrano Unified. And I had this, it was shocking to me, the difference in the funding and the resources at the California school versus the Delaware school versus the France school versus the way I grew up in Wisconsin. Like in Delaware, there was, at the elementary school, there was a PE teacher, there was an art teacher, there was an enrichment teacher, there was reading specialists. The class sizes were, 10 kids less per room. And I had always had this idea of California and the educational system as being the best of the best. I mean, when I was growing up, it was like, well, that, and I remember there were 2 kids that had come from a family that had moved from California, and they were like grade levels ahead of all of us, and they were just, and they were the coolest guys with their bleached blonde hair and their surfer dude language and all that kind of stuff, and so it was just shocking to me, and started to understand how there had been a shift. I suppose it was partly with Prop 13, but just that there was this shift in funding with California. And it was during, so we moved there in, 2010, 2011, around there. And I became, continued to become involved. I was on school site council. My two younger boys started in a Mandarin immersion program there, and they were in the first year of the program, and I became foundation president. And it was a school kind of like at Quail Run, which is a school in Doherty Valley, where it was a immersion program within a school site, not charter. It was a public program. And when the board approved that program, and it was parents that initiated it to start the program, they approved it with this idea of they're only going to pay for what they would pay in an English class, the desks, and this was a school district, mind you, where they did paper drives. Like their funding was so stripped down. They really struggled with managing the economic crisis that happened in the late 2000s, and so you would do fundraising drives where you would bring in reams of paper, and then the class that had the most reams of paper in kindergarten got the free pizza, right? Like it was just crazy to me. It was so ridiculous going from a state that has no sales tax, where property taxes are super low. It's a different state. It's much smaller. It's very, but it was just shocking to me that
you would have
difference.
to be doing a pizza paper drive.
Yeah. It just seemed crazy. So with the Mandarin immersion program, I became the foundation president and was able to work with the board. Because it was a new program, and it was kind of, they called it, it felt like it was their baby, but at the same time, they were removed from it, and the parents were very engaged. And so, so I was kind of that person that was helping to navigate the parent group through dealing with, fundraising, and then also figuring out ways to get the stuff that we were fundraising for, because we still had to go through the district, and there was a lot of, it was interesting, the logistics of navigating all of that. And so during that time, getting to know the board a little bit, I started to think that I felt like this is something that interests me. I feel like I'm a fairly calm person, and there's a lot of strife oftentimes with decisions, and that I consider myself to be someone that loves to collaborate, and I love to problem solve and those kinds of things. And then just anecdotally, I had been at a super small event with Tom Torlikson randomly, and was able to have his ear and talk about this program, and was talking to him about stuff. And he was the state superintendent at the time, and he had mentioned to me, he's like, have you ever thought about running for school board? And I was like, oh no, my kids were like third, second in kindergarten. I'm like, I don't have time for that. And he's like, well, it's valuable to have on the board, to have parents that are actually on the ground and
right, you're in the trenches.
Dealing with the stuff, and now's the time. And I'm like, oh yeah.
And now's the time. I love that everybody always says, and now's the time. Do you know what my last night, this mom the other day on the phone, she was telling me, talking to me about working with her daughter for the March test, and what can she do before you get started? And I said, well, look, reading is really one of those big things. Students don't read a ton anymore, and there is a large critical reading section on the SAT. And she tells me, she's like, why don't you have a book club? And I said, a book club? What do you mean? She says, well, why don't you start a book club for your kids? And I said, okay, that's fine, but we can't really meet like in a large group right now. And she said, well, you could do it on Zoom. And I laughed. I said, okay, you realize the kids are on Zoom 9 hours a day. And if I tried to get them on Zoom for another 2 hours to talk about a book that they didn't have to read,
right?
Even my powers of entertainment couldn't sell that. Like, when I do a book club, it's going to have like 4 Costco pizzas, a 12 pack of Coke, and Mario Kart, and then for a half an hour we'll talk about a book at the end. But like, if you're not giving, it's like, now's the time. Now is not the time. Stop telling me that. Might be the time for you. Anyway, keep going.
Right.
Now's the time.
No, yes, exactly. Yeah. So then we moved back up here, which had been the ultimate goal. We had tried to kind of fight our way back to Northern California, and became involved again. I've been on school site council at Iron Horse, and became a representative on the LCAP stakeholder committee, which I've thoroughly enjoyed and highly recommend any stakeholder, whether it's a parent, a teacher, to take that time, because it's an opportunity to really kind of really look at the accountability and the outcomes and brainstorm and kind of give a little bit of direction and guidance, so that then when the board makes their decisions about the choices that they're making with funding, they have
They have input.
They have input and,
Right.
and input that they're actually listening to, because I think that's, that's part of the issue right now. So it's an opportunity to have a voice. Just I guess it was. Well, we chose to move to San Ramon. I had been in enough school districts. I knew what a good school district looked like. I knew what I wanted my kids to have in a school district, how they manage their finances. That was an issue that I had down in Southern California. How they looked at arts and sports and just teacher retention, all of those things, right? And San Ramon, we wanted East Bay, and San Ramon was, boom, that's the spot. And then over, so we've been here for almost 6 years, I guess now. And the first couple of years, I was, it was great, And then I just started to just felt like there were these undercurrents of frustration. And then as the teachers started to struggle with, the bargaining was escalating, where they were threatening to strike, and it felt like there was this sense of, that it was I felt like there was a narrative, and it seemed, and now that I'm a little clearer on it, seemed like it was coming from the board. I didn't know at first, a few years ago, where it was coming from, and now that I've had an opportunity to really talk with teachers and talk with other parents, and it's like this idea that the teachers are taking away from the students if they want to raise, but then they turn around 6 months later and give based on the percentage they give, but the dollar amount they give a substantial amount more to the very and readily to the very people that were saying we can't give the teachers this 2% raise, which amounted to probably maybe $1,500 a year, right, while they give the outgoing superintendent $80,000. So and call it equitable. To me that's not equitable. It's there's no equity in that. But so that was frustrating, that the fact that it was a unanimous choice, and then the fact that with that, I as a parent didn't understand why. Right. I didn't, and all of the other parents that I was talking to that were getting frustrated, we didn't understand. We would listen to these 5-hour-long meetings, and we still walked away feeling frustrated, unhappy, not understanding, not at least feeling like we were heard,
right,
know?
And underrepresented. That's
Absolutely.
That's one of the things that I think is one of the undercurrents that I hear from my parents and the parents in the areas is just kind of like, look, the Board of Education, we elect these people, and they're supposed to be representing our interests. And then you have 5-hour meetings, and people come out of them with, like their eyes spinning and kind of glazed over, and you don't really know how things were going or why they were going, and a lot of the frustrations. For instance, the superintendent one, this seems to be a really, really big sticking point for the vast majority of people. They say, hey, look, in March, the teachers union agrees, we get a raise, and the superintendents get a raise as well. And people are not happy, but they're like, look, he was already on his way out. There was no reason to give him a raise. And the reasoning behind it from the board was, hey, this was tradition.
Right.
As you pointed out,
exactly.
this is always what we do. If I may ask, and it's a horrible question to put to you right out of the blocks, but what would you have done? Because we had this long, prolonged negotiation period with the teachers. The raise was supposed to come in July 1, 2019. And then there was this prolonged negotiation phase. And up until this point, nobody had ever had a problem with the Me Too. Whenever the teachers get a raise, the executives get the same percentage of raise. Up until this point, nobody has had an issue with that. But then in March, it happens, as it always has. The teachers get the retroactive raise, which they deserve, of course. And the superintendent gets the raise. And then all of a sudden, people say, hey, this is absurd. So what... if I may ask, what about the whole situation would you have perhaps done differently?
Well, I think that part of why it was such a struggle was that there was this level of contention between the teachers and the board in terms of asking for this amount, and the teachers made some concessions, and there was this, from the teachers' perspective, what I've heard from them is that there was this feeling that they would be in a room and the board, or they would be listening to the board meeting or whatever, and what they would hear is that the board saying, you're taking away from the students, you're taking away from the bottom line of the kids, and so then it became this narrative of, it's not what's best for the kids kind of a thing.
Sure.
But then they
I've definitely heard that as well.
Yeah. But then they turn around, and when they're discussing the raises for the executive cabinet and the superintendent, there wasn't any of that. What are you taking away from? There wasn't the same narrative, right? So there's that like, lack of really feeling like everyone's taking ownership of that, so-called money grab, right?
It's funny that people talk about equity. They're like, we can't give this to them and not give it to the others. But when the blame goes on the teachers, that's a very fair point, that the blame gets put on the teachers. Every dollar we give these teachers is a dollar we can't spend in the classroom, but none of the blame gets put perhaps on for instance, the superintendent. Nobody's saying, hey, we just increased his salary by $50,000.
Right.
That's a whole lot of textbooks.
Right.
That's a very fair point.
And there's a difference between a $1,500 raise and I think he actually got, if my numbers are right in my head, I think he got close to $80,000 in the end. But that $50,000 raise, right? There's a difference. That to me is, that's, you could call it equal in that it's the same percentage. But so what I would have done if I was on the board, and again, I'm not being on the board, I'm not part of the issue. I'm not privy to 90% of what goes on behind closed doors.
As is everyone else. Nobody knows what goes on.
Nobody knows. And decisions are made behind closed doors in a way that we're told, and then a week later we're told something different, and then a week later we're told something different. And I know that's the same for the teachers too. It's not, there is this kind of like, moving target, unbalanced ground, where you just don't know what's going to happen next. And that, I mean, I could also, that goes into, from my perspective, in this time in our life, in our world, there's so much unknown, fear, anxiety, and to have leadership that's creating more of a swirl underneath us it just makes my stomach hurt,
And I just really want to point out to you, as you're about to answer this question, that of course you don't know what went on behind closed doors. And I don't think the people listening to this, if anybody's still listening, I don't think the people listening are expecting you to be privy to that information. But part of this is just understanding, look, what are the guiding principles that these people are bringing to the table? Is it, hey, we have to be united in the benefit and in the pros and the cons from the teachers and the management, right? Like, is that what we're looking for? Or is it, hey, if we have to take from somewhere, maybe take from the people making the highest gross dollar, right? Or whatever that would be. Right. So again, please don't mistake my questions for, hey, you have the magic wand, because that's of course not fair. So again, you were saying.
And I say that because I do believe that everyone from the board on down is doing the very best that they think, that they can. But I think specifically with the board that they have blinders on and they're not really looking at the full picture, and that's where I think part of the issue is in the breakdown. But so what I would have done if I was sitting on the board is I would have, and someone said to me, this isn't the contract, we don't have a choice, we can't, do it, make a change. I would say, okay, I would say we need to change that contract. If we can't change it in this specific moment, we need to explain to our stakeholders, to everyone at the board, that we do not have a choice, but we will change things so that in the future we will have a choice. And I would make sure that when we come to the next point of whatever it is with, like the new superintendent, that's a new contract, right? Making sure that, to me, equitable would have been, you have, the teachers, they fight for that 2% raise, and, they get that 2% raise, and then there's the Me Too, the equal part with everyone else in the district, and there's a cap on it. So anyone making more than $150,000 or whatever, we can look at the economics of the area and see what a true
Right. You could have a moving
good
target.
living salary is
Sure.
for a professional
Sure.
who's, has 30 years experience, whatever, and then that's the cap of that 2%. And then once it gets past that, then maybe it's a dollar amount. Maybe it's something that where there's still that superintendent that has that higher responsibility does, get compensation that's
Analogous.
consistent.
Yeah.
But it's not a full 2% on 400,000 is a lot different than 2% on 100,000. And and it's the 100,000 wage earners that had to fight kicking and screaming to get that and be, in some ways vilified for it. And then the outgoing superintendent that's halfway out the door just gets it and walks out, right? I mean, it's at a time when
Right.
COVID is happening, when there's a budget deficit. There's so much. We have teachers that are leaving, annually. It just feels like it's like, why are we, we're struggling with the kids have textbooks that are, their parents used sometimes, I mean, it's just like, why?
Look, Mom, your name's in the binder. Look at that.
That's a little exaggeration, but the curriculum's older, or at least what the teachers. I know that teachers spend a lot of time building out curriculum, but my oldest was telling me that he's had several of his teachers. He's a junior at Cal, and he's had several of his teachers talk about how they're rewriting the curriculum this year, and they're not using the textbooks, and they're pulling from all of these other sources, which is awesome. I mean, that's amazing. But what is one of the reasons why they're doing that? Because the textbook that they have, was written in 1990, and and doesn't talk about it. The people in the classroom aren't reflected in that textbook. They're not able to pull information from that textbook about the LGBT community, or about immigration, or about anything that's really not only topical, but that our students need to learn about, and they want to learn about
Right.
climate change, so many things, right?
That are more contemporary and pressing, and things that they'll be engaging
And
with.
engaged,
Right.
yes, yeah.
You actually brought up a tremendous point. So you have a wide variety in this district of ways to address certain problems. For instance, teaching math, right? The way Doherty Valley does it compared to the way San Ramon Valley does it, these are completely different approaches, right? At the Doherty Valley level, you have a completely unified math department. They get together, they plan on how they're going to do things, and because of that, Doherty Valley is like a juggernaut. They're monsters when it comes to success with teaching math and things of that nature. In San Ramon, not as much. You have a less communicative department, right? So you don't have people that are getting together before the school year and saying, okay, look, this is going to be my approach. What's your approach? Is there a way we could tailor these so like I'll pass off these kids and you'll catch them and it'll be perfect and seamless? Is that something that as a board member you would think would be important to address? Because again, you have capable students that want to learn, that are inclined towards different subjects. I've spoken with many parents and students at San Ramon Valley High School that say, look, one teacher's teaching one thing, another teacher's teaching another thing, and we're all over the place. And the parents, some of which are in finance and very capable in math, look at the work and they say, what the hell are they teaching you? And here these kids are freaking out. Do you think it would be a priority in your mind, or something that is worth looking at as a board member to say, hey, look, is there a way that we can look at the different schools within this district, and we have a wide variety of approaches, and instead of trying to go within a school and saying, okay, this math teacher does this math teacher does this, say, let's look at a school level. Let's look at a school level and say, what does Doherty Valley do that's really good? What does Monte Vista do that's really good? What's San Ramon do that's really good? And let's pull these resources and these experiences together to make a district-wide approach that maybe not every department has to adhere to, but at the very least they could have as a reference.
They have access to it.
Yes.
They have access to that knowledge, yeah. I mean, I think that ultimately
I'm sorry I left out Cal High, by the way.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
I promise I'm not a bad person.
Maybe orange.
I love you, my Cal High students.
Orange just isn't your favorite color.
Aren't you happy you're here? Anyway, I'm sorry, you were saying.
I think so. So one of the things that with the LCAP committee that we do, and it's accountability for the state funding, is that we look at the state has a dashboard of all of the school sites and age groups, and it breaks out into the different demographics and stuff of outcomes. And we look at it when you're on a school site council. Usually, one of the first meetings that you have in the fall is it's a brainstorming meeting, and you just talk about you're given the LCAP goals, which are set every 3 years. You're given those goals, and then you brainstorm about them, and you write down, this is what this school site, like what Iron Horse is doing well, this
Sure.
is where they need improvement. And then the administration takes that, the principal, and they take those, and then at the LCAP meeting at the district level, we look at all that aggregated information, and then we break out into groups based on the different goals and different sub-goals within the goals.
Sure.
And we look at all the data, and we see, okay, this, Bollinger Canyon's doing great with their ESL students have a much better outcome than Twin Creeks or whatever. And so what are they doing? So then we look at the notes and the lists. Oh, this is, and so then we start to talk about it, and then we kind of, as a group, will present it to the rest of the group, and then they take that information, the administration takes that information, and then they come up with initiatives. And we get to be a part of kind of talking about that and brainstorming about initiatives as well. And so I think there's, from a gathering of information, there's a place for that. I think that it ends up kind of stopping after they get to the outcomes high enough so that then they don't have to worry about having issues with the funding. They get the added little bonus for
Sure.
having increased outcomes and that kind of thing.
You don't get a better GPA bump for an A versus an A plus.
Right.
Right. It's all the same.
Right. And so, so I think the issue, one of the things that I've seen in these last 2-3 years, and I don't know if it came out of Schmidt's leadership or how it happened. I'm sure it had everything to do with budget cuts. Was that they reorganized the administration at the district level. There was all this movement and the hopping of positions, and positions ending, and then positions being added in, and then positions kind of being one person that it used to be 3 and now it's one person, and that kind of thing. And so I think what's happened is that there really isn't anyone. There's one person, and I don't think so. His name's Greg. I don't know his last name, who was in charge of math at the district. One person in charge of all of that stuff. And I'm sure he had some team, but it wasn't. My understanding was that he was, kind of the driving force. And I know his position has changed, and then they have a STEM coordinator who does a great job. But it's like now there's still that kind of one person with some TOSAs that are managing that, as opposed to putting the money into the leadership to be able to take all of that information from each of the school sites and then drive direction for the school sites to be able to say, so for like San Ramon Valley to be able to know what Doherty Valley is doing. And then, like you said, to be able to take that and for someone at the administration level or a group of people to be able to build out framework. It's not about curriculum, it's about framework, right? And then letting the teachers build out the curriculum, but build out that framework so that they know what works, and they can take what they know will work for them within that framework and pull that in.
Right. And that was going to kind of...
As opposed to being siloed, right? There's this
Sure.
real sense of, and I think it comes from resourcing. I think it's just that there isn't, that we're so spread thin that there isn't that talent, if you will, that person to be able to really dive deep and flesh it out and then bring it out to the teacher so that they can take it and run with it.
Do you think and this may be very difficult to answer, but do you think it's necessarily a resource question or more a philosophical question of, hey, look, teachers, like a primary care physician, right? They're overregulated. They're dumped with paperwork. It's something like 45 to 50% of a standard primary care physician's time is spent filling out paperwork instead of treating patients. And I know one big criticism of the way teachers have been managed in the last several years has been, hey, look, you're forcing them, you're trying to make them like an assembly line.
Right. And
teaching is not an assembly. And I can speak to this 100%. It's not an assembly line. So do you think it's that that we don't have the resources or the ability with everything we have now, with all the technology we have, with the seamless communication. I mean, you could even record different lesson plans very easily and take pieces out of them. Do you think it's that we don't have the resources, or that people don't want to put their hands on the teachers and overmanage them anymore?
Well, I think it's the way that I see it, that, like, what I see as being something that's sustainable and doable isn't regulating the teachers and telling them, like I know with Common Core, there was a lot of that fear. You have to teach this way, and you have to, and I think what it needs to be is that you are, that at the district, they're providing services for the school sites, so that the school sites and then on down to the teachers, and even on down to the students in the way that they're being taught, are able to pull those pieces of the puzzle that they want to use and bring them down into the classroom, as opposed to the district kind of, suppose the district saying, this is how we teach math, you need to teach math this way. The district saying, these are great ways that we know work. This is working at Doherty Valley. Here's a teacher that you can that's willing to partner with you if this is a model that you want to use, that kind of thing, right? So that so that we don't have teachers who are feeling like they're in their comfort zone of the way that they teach, and it's hard to do new things. I mean, it's not easy, and it's, and I think it's scary as well. I mean, there's lots of, reasons why you don't.
Try teaching a Zoom class. That's pretty terrifying.
Yeah,
it's hard to do new things.
Yeah. And so wouldn't it be great, if, like, in the context of Zoom, if there was, and maybe there was, I know it was only over the course of 2 or 3 days, but an opportunity for teachers to be able to get the skills, and then they can take that and then they can build their classroom around it, right? So in the context of math, being able to have a place where you can pull what's working from different people based on how you want it to work in your classroom, as opposed, opposed to that, like,
yes. So you have a resource, and you have, for instance.
Exactly.
So if I may summarize, then I think what you're saying is, hey, look, on the district level, on the up top level, we need to do a better job of providing the resource for, say, mentorship or guidance or lesson plan mirroring, things like that to the teachers. But ultimately, we need to allow the teachers to teach in the manner that they see best, or they feel is best fit.
Yeah. They know the students. They know how they teach. They know what works for them, right? And they know the students that they're teaching. So they know. They're gonna want to teach the way that the kids learn as well, right? And I think that, just this idea of, and I think this is kind of a fundamental shift that needs to happen in San Ramon Valley Unified, is this idea of the district works for the school sites rather than the school sites doing what the district commands, right? So this idea of, we're a unified school district, and having the sense as a student on up to the teacher, to the school site administration, to, that it's you're working up as opposed to talking down, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's one of the biggest problems with education, because, for instance, you were earlier talking about elementary education. Well, the third grader should be the person guiding the adults, right? Like, the group of third graders are totally at the whim of whatever these people decide, and it will be their life that's affected, right? Because the adults teaching them and the people on the administration level that are overseeing everything, they're already off and going. I mean, we're dealing with the people that are the most vulnerable, and as we should likely always consider, the most vulnerable should at least significantly guide, if not completely guide, what everybody does, right? Because again, if you're not providing what you need for that third grader, then it's lights out, man. I mean, it's a really difficult thing. Speaking of younger kids, how do you feel that we're managing the remote learning at this point? Because for older kids, I mean, look, it stinks. If you're at 16 or 17 or 18 or even 15, it's like, this is the worst. But you're likely not in tears every night, on average. Right. I'm not saying there aren't people losing it, myself included. But for for elementary age kids, one of the biggest things of first, second, third grade, especially kindergarten and TK, you're dealing with people where the interaction is so much of the education, the collaborative activities and fine motor skills, and you have supplies in a classroom like art supplies that whipping those out at the kitchen table at home is going to be a very big problem and super adult intensive. So we're looking at probably another several months of this, and how do we continue on in a way? In your opinion, again, I know this is very difficult. It's like steering an iceberg.
Right.
But how do we keep going in a way so that we don't lose this entire class of elementary kids?
Yeah, I don't.
That's a terrible question. I know.
No,
I'm sorry.
No, it's an important one. I mean, I think that it's it's such a hard time for everybody, and I feel like I heard this on a podcast, actually.
Look at that.
I heard this
Never
phrase.
believe what you hear on a podcast.
I heard this phrase, we're all in the same storm, but not everyone has the same boat.
Yes.
You know, and this and it certainly goes with our SDC students and our ESL students and our at-risk youth and housing insecure, there's so many layers to that. But when you look at the TK through second, third grade, they're, like you said, it's having class with a screen. You don't have it doesn't even compare. I think about so my kids are 8th grade and then 10th and 11th, and they're handling it and they're managing it.
Yes.
and I'm removed from it. I sit at my desk and do my work, and every once in a while I'll have to peek in and say, put your video on or whatever, and I have to look at the Google Classroom weekly things, but that's about it. I'm not, they're making their own lunch, they're doing everything. And I don't know, but they're still struggling emotionally. They're still struggling with the social, and they're still struggling with those kinds of things. And so then when I think about them if they were in K, 2nd and 3rd grade, I wouldn't, I mean, I don't even know what to say, I mean, it's just.
Yeah, I have preschool, 1st grade and 3rd grade.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, I cannot imagine. And I think that there has to be with the, at the meeting on Tuesday, they're talking about ideas, and I was really glad to see that they have a plan for the SDC kids, and that because that's been a concern of mine, because that's just a whole nother level of holes in the boat, if you will, right? But they're talking about the TK through 5th grade, the full elementary school, and I almost feel like they need to, yes, 4th and 5th grade, they also need to be concerned, but I really think in order to make it a quicker, more sustainable roll back into Onsite, they really need to focus at that, even just 2K through 2nd, just getting them back in and working through that, because they're the ones that not only I feel like they're losing the most out of that social interaction and that the motor skills and all that stuff, but their families have a much more increased burden, and so then you're.
I'm only laughing because if I don't, I'm going to cry.
Right? Yeah.
Having the 4, 6, and 8-year-old running around, and the 4-year-old, you're just trying to. I mean, I can't even go. We don't have enough time to talk about it. But yes, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. And I think that like I can sit here and I can be like, I really want I really want my son to go on this field trip or to have this, whatever, which is important. But I think that there needs to be a priority list that then, it could ebb and flow as things change, but there really needs to be some structure behind, it's almost like this idea, what I felt like when I was watching the board meeting on Tuesday was it's almost like this, it's a candy store and you just want everything to work. You just want to make sure that everyone gets back to school and everyone, and everyone has a choice and everyone gets what they want and everyone, and so let's do everything that we can as quick as we can to make sure everyone gets what they want. And I think that there needs to be a stronger leadership sense of no one's going to get everything that they want. And let's look at where the most value is in terms of how we roll this back in so that in the end, everyone gets what they want, but we're really making sure that we provide services to the kids that have the most holes in their boat. I mean, I know that, that's not necessarily the best political thing to say, and I know that there's a lot of very vocal parents that are, rattling the cages about getting back right away, and there's value in that, and there's importance in that. And I'm grateful that we're in a community where people feel comfortable being able to really talk about that and speak about that and explain the why behind them. But I think there also needs to be a level of executive decision making that creates space where it needs to be and creates the voice where it needs to be, so that it's about equity. It's also about common denominator services. It's about instead of, to get what this person wants, we have to shave off what that person needs so that everything can be right. What we need to do is the people the groups that have the highest need, we need to shore them up and then build on top of it instead of shaving it from the bottom.
Right, because absolutely, because dealing with an 11th grader who may hate learning math online, but at least to some degree is successfully learning math online, that person may be able to just hang on for one more month, because guess what? This second grader has to get out of the house. Because for a multitude of reasons, not the least of which is parents' mental state and their employment and all kinds of things. One of the
family mental state, because I think, I mean, it affects the way that our kids are seeing us. I mean, I know for me, when in the spring, which was really hard and for many reasons, and that like there would be frustration and there'd be arguing and fighting, and you need to sit down and do this, and you have too many zeros and you're gonna and it's and it just became this kind of a confrontation that then, for a third grader or a kindergartner or a 10th grader, it's like they're starting to feel like my mom, my dad, they're mad. I hear that
they're mad all the time.
Yeah, they're mad all the time. Frustrated, and we are, but we're scared too, and we don't know what to do. And there's, and so having that empathy and that for everyone, but understanding that, we all have to give a little to be able to get a lot.
Right. And again, to your point, it's, for people that aren't going through it right now, it's so impossible to explain. I have a very good friend who lives 4 houses up, and he moved to the street because we lived there. I mean, this is a really dear friend, and he and his wife have 2 little kids, I believe 2.5 and then like the 6 months. So when this went down, they were hanging out in their house and just hanging out in their house, right? And he works for a university, and he was able to work from home, and she's very fortunate to not work for at this point. She works with the kids at home, and we were struggling 4 houses up, and we obviously quarantined, and we weren't able to see each other. And then after about 2 months, we started to break down a little bit, and they said, what, and in various ways they started noticing. They're like, what's going on with you guys? And the answer was, this is really, really hard. Like, we have at the time we had a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 7-year-old, or he was 8 at that point. But the point is it's not like we're just hanging out in our backyard. Our kids are climbing all over each other. They're there 24 hours a day. And as you're saying, we become people. You become people very quickly after not having a break from your kids and not being away from them that you really dislike. And that's one of my greater concerns for younger people. Because look, a 16-year-old, mom's cranky or dad's cranky, I can just hang out in my room and play a little Fortnite, call it a day.
And they're kind of baked already a little bit,
right?
Yeah.
Right. But a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old or 6-year-old or 7-year-old, they don't have the capacity to understand that, nor do they have the capacity to regulate themselves. So they don't know, hey, dad's a little touchy, let's back off.
Right.
They're all over you. And that's I believe it's the American Association of Pediatrics was pleading with the administration and school boards in general, saying, hey, look, you have to get kids back in school for the safety of the kids. And when I read that, it brought me to tears, because I realized, oh my God, we're trying really hard to keep it together, and we are. And the burden, we were falling apart personally, but privately. Like my wife and I could help each other because we were leaning on each other more and more. It was like, oh my God, this is really hard. But we weren't falling apart for our kids. And I realized how easy it would be to do that, and how scary it would be if I were one of those kids with a parent who didn't have a spouse right next to them, and they weren't managing it appropriately, and maybe all of a sudden, dad's drinking by noon every single day, and it's like, oh my God, the fear that I think I would have as a kid, and the pain I was thinking about just as an adult, the sympathy I have for both the kids and the parents is substantial. So in line with that, but actually one other thing that I wanted to mention that you touched on before I keep going, you said that at the board meeting, they say, hey, look, let's get everyone everything they want.
Well, that was the way I saw it. It
No,
felt like
that's
that.
fine.
Yeah, they
That's
didn't
fine.
say that, but yeah.
Wouldn't that be hilarious?
It would be funny.
If the board's up there, listen, hey, everybody gets whatever they want. Somebody in the back's like, can I have a lollipop too? He gets a lot. Get him a lollipop. Get him two. A chocolate one. Anyway, so that type of game plan it's so similar to what I see some younger people doing. Okay, so like you have a 16 or 17-year-old or an 18-year-old who's, let's say, an animal welfare advocate, and the kid says, I'm a vegan, and it's fine, I have nothing wrong with vegans, but they say, you are not taking the atrocious nature of the way we treat animals seriously enough. Like, I'm all in for animals, all of these, like those who can't speak for themselves. And I think that's great. I think that's honorable. I think people should be fired up about that stuff. Fine. And, whatever your issue is. But it's also, I feel like, a thing that younger people do to avoid actually having to look at the actionable issues in their life, right? So it always comes back to, look, why are you worried about the cow out there that you'll never meet when there are aspects of your life that even I know about, and I'm just your tutor, even I see that are being neglected, but you feel righteous, and you feel appropriate and good about yourself by going after this more noble path. And when I hear things like that board meeting where it's essentially like, look, we're gonna work as hard as we can to get everybody everything, I feel like it's kind of a similar thing, which is that's actually code for we're not going to make a really, really hard decision like you're advocating for, which is, hey, what can we do right now for the most vulnerable, for the students in resource, for the students that are, say, ESL, for the students that don't have permanent housing, for the younger students who are at risk at home, as horrific as that sounds, what can we do for them right now, today? Because this is triage. If we try to eat the whale in one bite, we'll never get there. We need to take little bites, and you got to start somewhere. Do you see that as well, or do you just think that it's? I'm sorry.
Well, I want it. I want that. I want it to be that way. I mean, I don't know. I think part of this, the issue with the current board is that, I said earlier that they have blinders on. They've been in those seats for a long time. I don't want to say that they're all political animals, because they're not, but political in that seat, and that they, you get to a point, I think, when you're in when you're in a leadership role like that, where you've been desensitized over and over again, and you just you feel like you fly above it, and it's like, I know what needs to happen, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to make sure that it, and you can tell me what you want and tell me what your perspective is, but I have 50 other people telling me other perspectives, and I just need to have my blinders on and focus, right? I just need to get to the finish line.
You're just tired of talking.
Right. And so I can look at that and say, okay, I can see where they're coming from that perspective. But then I think, well, that tells me that you need to step down.
Right.
Because, you're done. You're done. You're just trying to get to to find the solution that's going to make the people that you hear happy, and you're not, and what you're going to feel good about in your heart, but you're not really paying attention to everyone that's on the other side of those blinders that are just like, scared and frustrated and don't know what to do and don't know where to turn and don't know how to manage their day, and they're just looking for a leader that hears them, that explains to them why they're making the decisions, and that says, I hear you. I can't make a decision that's going to make everyone happy. Decisions are hard. This is why we're doing this, and give real solid reasons. Give the you don't have to. I know that there's privacy issues and there's all kinds of things they can't tell us everything, right? But at least tell us, give us a hand so that we can meet you halfway, instead of us feeling there's just these barriers and a wall and a wall and a wall, and now we're all so frustrated that we don't know how to even get to the other side to really talk.
Right.
It's just,
and I think we can push a lot of the bad discourse and the lack of civility and this pattern onto social media. I think that's a very easy thing that I do, and I look, I don't think it's helping at all. But you also don't make it any better if, say, I have the right answer. I just have it. I'm like, listen, I have the right answer. This is the right answer. This is what we're going to do. And I'm considering, say, 100 things in arriving at this right answer. Okay, if I ram the right answer down everyone's throat, and I don't explain the 100 reasons why it's the right answer, well, then people justifiably should question me. And in the absence of a response on my behalf, then they need to say, hey, we need to get somebody else, because he's ramming this right answer, his right answer down our throat. And it's the failing of me because I didn't explain, it's not my right answer. It's your right answer. Let me explain to you why.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I feel like, just back to kind of the idea of rolling back into on-site learning, I feel like there's not a lot of creativity around the thought process. And so, you talk about what are if the board looked at this, or whoever was, the administration that's coming up with the plans, however they want to approach it, but looks at it like, what are the highest priority needs for each subgroup?
Sure.
And then looking at that and then finding solutions for each of those needs. So, for example, I think from my little spot in my house with my 4 teenaged kids, I think that the highest need for that age group isn't academics being taught in the classroom. I think it's the social aspect of not being in school, the competitiveness of sports or performing arts, those things that make those students at that age engage, right? Be excited about their life and their future in a way that a book or a math test isn't going to, right? They're not, like when you think about like when I think about the memory that I have of starting kindergarten, I wanted to know how to read so bad, and I couldn't wait to go to school, and I couldn't wait to, and that engaged me, right? It wasn't for me, it wasn't the recess. And I know when my boys were in second grade, it was recess.
Sure.
But, but that, that it was that kind of, there's so much physical about learning when you're little, right? When you get into high school, yes, it total bummer that you're on a Zoom class. I mean, there's so many things that are, feel uncomfortable, and it's different.
When you hang out with your friends, you're on your phone anyway.
Exactly,
Get out of here. Look at any lunch at a high school. They're all staring at their phones anyway.
No, I know, but where are those opportunities to be able to, I don't know, I know that it's not, an option, but to be able to be in a play, or to be able to, sing in a choir, or
right.
to, my daughter's in color guard, marching band. And
I was in band too. God bless it.
I actually did drum and bugle corps. I was in.
Look at you. I never did. I didn't. Oh, you were in the Blue Devils?
I was 1990 in the color guard. Yeah.
Oh my God! I may have actually seen you at the Concord Pavilion.
Oh, maybe.
I don't know if you ever played there, but
yeah.
when I was in middle school, my good friend Jess Pomeroy, his dad took us to the Concord Pavilion to watch the Blue Devils. Yeah, I played trumpet from elementary school all the way up, and piano and stuff. I'm a huge fan of the arts.
Yeah. No, I played trumpet. That's how I got into drum corps, and then I switched to color guard because I had a horrible ear, and it was was ugly.
Oh my God. Do you still have your trumpet?
No. I actually in 10th grade. So we started high school in 10th grade, and in 10th grade I stopped doing band and switched to color guard, and then kind of moved on from there because I didn't feel like, and then I got rid of my trumpet, and
I still have my
rifle.
trumpet.
Yeah.
Yeah, bought a rifle.
Well, that's what you do in color guard. You spin rifles and flags.
I got it.
I was in northern Wisconsin.
Yeah, I know. I mean,
deer hunting.
God bless it, man. I could kill people with my trumpet, I'm sure. I was like,
that's the way I played. Absolutely.
So speaking of younger people, here's a really, really hot topic that everyone seems to be scratching for an answer. How do we, let's say you and I agree. We're like, all right, look, we have the solution. We need to get pre-K, so TK, K, first and second back in person as quickly as possible. We need to get them back. We need to press the flesh, get people, meeting people helping people. It's a beautiful thing, right? So how do we get them back as quickly as possible to an in-person experience without forcing our teachers to come back for an in-person experience?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's all so hard, right? I think that the district would be wise to survey the teachers and find out. They should have done this a while ago. They should have done this before the school. They should have taken the time and had the ability to be able to have the foresight to do this, but find out from the teachers who is comfortable being in the classroom and who's not. And then, in hindsight, then they should have built out the classes like that, knowing that they're, like had you in July, had we known, I think there was also lack of guidance from the state, from the national, state, county. It's certainly a perfect storm, but had they had the foresight to think about what it was going to look like in October, best case scenario and worst case scenario, what it was going to look like in January, best case scenario and worst case scenario, and then build the plan back from there so that they could, do it in a more intentional way, right? Instead of throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping that it lands in the right spot, right?
Right.
So, because the issue that we're having, that then the outcry with the parents and the way that it was discussed at the board meeting was that there's going to be, now the students there's going to be teacher changes and class changes and all that stuff has to happen in order to accommodate the smaller class size, the hybrid versus the remote, the teachers that want to teach on site, and and so had they had at least an idea of who those teachers are, I think that would have made a difference in terms of the overall planning of making this a smoother transition. So communicating with our teachers, I think, just bottom line. And again, you look back at the last few years and there are barriers built up and lack of trust and transparency between the teachers and the district and the board, right? And then now, we're kind of reaping the rewards. You know what I mean? We're like having to deal, or the opposite of the rewards. We're having to deal with, the fact that they're, had the it's hard to, whatever. It's hard to say what they should have, could have, would have, right? But had there been a reaching out to everyone involved in a way where they ask the right questions, of how, where I see my kids, where I see them to be, knowing everything I knew in August and July, where I want them to be in January. And granted, my mind has changed, several times, but the core thing is about safety, and as much as my opinion has changed in terms of the, risk versus value of, walking outside with a mask on or whatever, whatever it is, there's still that core kind of idea of my biggest priority for my kindergartner is for them to be in the classroom, or my biggest priority for my 10th grader is for them to be happy, or to be, to not be so sad, or to, whatever it is, right?
The mental health for the teenagers is quite substantial.
Right. And I think that instead of just this, do you want hybrid or do you want remote? It's almost like they didn't really ask the right questions at the beginning to really get to the answer that we need now.
Sure.
So I think that's where the
Sure.
breakdown is.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think communication and figuring out who would be comfortable with what, even though it's a moving target.
It is, yeah.
So if, let's say we get a list, right? You and I work it out. We get a list. It's like, all right, these are the teachers. These are the teachers we want, or excuse me, that are fine with coming back. Say they're younger teachers, they're in very good health, they're not caring for anyone, they don't have any dependents, things like that, right? These are the teachers that are willing to come back and happy to come back, and these are the teachers that are less inclined to.
Yeah.
And we build out a plan around that. Do we, let's say you and I are in charge of the district, do we make a plan to go back in person and put this plan in action and have parents change their work and change their childcare and commit to having at least a certain portion of the kids coming back into school, even if we know we might get shut down 2 weeks from now if we go purple or red or maroon? I don't know what the colors are, but we go in the county-wide, they say, hey, I know we were cool to go back a month ago. We're not anymore. Shut it down. So if that's the option, or just saying, hey, look, even though there are teachers that want to come back and are willing to come back, the difficulty and logistical hurdles that we would have to go through and the commitment we would make to the parents that we don't know if we could keep,
Yeah.
that's not worth it. We're going to stay remote until at least 2021 or something like that. Which do we pick? Because both are obviously very imperfect,
Right.
but we got to pick one
Yeah. Well, and
if we have that magic list.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think that if you go back to the list and you look at, okay, these 3 highest priorities we can do in a way where we can get, whether it's a waiver situation or whatever, where we know we know that we can resource this in a way, fund this in a way that it is sustainable within that cohort group. Right? So STC classes or, the TK through 2, that kind of thing where we know these students, we're going to move them into Onsite and we're going to set it up in a way with the guidance from the county and the state that even if we go back to purple, that as long as we stay in our group, we've set it up so that there is that possibility where it, just like there is with anything, right, where it may not, there may be a infection and then, we just have to shut it down. But if you look past that, because that we can't control any of that.
And that's kind of like the county. That's what I'm getting at. We go back to purple and you said, hey, county, we're playing by your rules. Okay, we have this 12-person cohort. There's only one teacher. There's boom, boom, boom. You go through the whole checklist.
Right.
The county the next day delivers a different checklist.
Yeah,
and
well,
now all of a sudden, and again, through no fault of your own, you have to go back to the parents and say, hey, parents, I know you told your bosses now you could come back in, you've started taking employment or you've changed childcare plans, because nobody's going to keep a babysitter
Right.
if they're like, hey, see you later, right? Babysitter's not getting paid. Now all of a sudden you have to scramble. So there's an inherent risk in the variability of the world right now that would obviously get passed, that risk would get passed on to the parents and the families who agreed to come back in person. Is that a risk that you feel like, say we could get these 12-person cohorts and say we could go to red versus purple and say we could agree to all of the county's rules, today's rules.
Right.
Do you think that's a risk and that the families should absorb?
I wish I could say no, of course not, or yes, absolutely, because I don't know the answer. I think that that we have to look at things, risk versus value, and I think that we have to weigh the value versus the risk, right? And I also know that if the county gives the red and things move forward and then 3 weeks later they're moving it back to purple, every single person in that county is in the same boat.
Yeah.
And so so we're all going to be at the same level of frustration, the same level of anger and of fear and all of that stuff, which doesn't make it any better. But I would hope that because it wouldn't just be an individual, it would be a large group, that there would be things put in place to be able to make it manageable, not necessarily to make it the same as what it was when it was in the red, but at least to be able to make it so that you're not on a dime having to, because we already did that, right? We already all sheltered in place over the weekend, for
over the weekend.
Well, no, you know what I mean? It was like, okay,
Yes.
Monday, and then it's only going to be 2 weeks, and then now we're looking at a year, I mean,
Yeah.
it's just, and
I remember it perfectly.
yeah. But, we're all, I mean, it's just that we're all, I feel like we're all kind of in the same place. And as sad and depressing as that sounds, there's also empowerment in that we, I can look at my neighbor and they may not be in the exact same situation, but at least we're all, like they say, right, we're all in it together. It sounds cheesy, but
I was a rower in college, so
nice.
when people talk about being in the same boat, like I kind of like the hair on the back of my neck. So I'm like, oh god, I don't want to. No, I got you. No, it's great. It's great. So one thing what about just talking to people?
Yeah.
Right? Like this seems to be. Like if say you're on the board or you and I are on the board and we have this plan, we have the magic list, we have the 12-person cohort, we have it all. We could give the options to the families and just say, hey, look, you can either accept the risk that we're in it for 2 weeks and then you have to find childcare again, or you cannot. But again, that's where that big piece of communication comes back, which is, hey, look, we are beholden to these higher powers and we're trying everything we can. We want to offer you this option. We don't know how stable that option is. And if you have to go through great strides to change your whole life to accept this other option, you have to realize that there's an inherent risk that comes along with it.
Yeah, exactly.
As far as, if I may pivot here just really quickly, there's obviously an enormous problem with the SATs and the ACTs being not just administered but accepted, okay? And they are huge indicators of success within the first year. The UC system did a study recently and they determined that they are the number one indicator or predictor of success within a student's first year in college, which is great, right? I mean, we all want accurate prediction rather.
Right.
Just want prediction. So with the UCs, being obviously students saying they're going to phase this test out, and the Cal States will probably follow closely behind. Doherty Valley has always, in my mind, been this just, again, I said it before, it's just a juggernaut. Like, they are so successful at gaining national merit, creating students that are capable and successful in this metric. And as we take away, not you and I, but obviously as the quantifiable measures of prediction step away, how would you feel is best to continue improving their odds of admissions? Because ultimately, the majority of people going to Doherty Valley want their students to go to a 4-year university or something similar. They want to go on some form of higher education. And they've always been so successful at getting after those things. They're like good SAT, good GPA.
The current model of
yes,
yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
But as that model changes, how do you think the model of supplying students with distinguishing factors should change?
So I believe that we need to graduate like world-ready, full, lifelong, passionate learners.
Do you want them to be like 25 by the time
I
they
know,
graduate?
I know.
I was a monkey at 18.
No, I know, but just not.
I appreciate you, though.
I know, and not. I guess not the, I mean that's definitely a pie in the sky. But the intent of creating, kids, educating kids in a way that they can step out into the world and be critical thinkers and be able to look at something or someone that's different than them, that talks different than them, and look at that person or that viewpoint in a way that excites them rather than that they're afraid of, that kind of mentality. And I think that, so I've had the luxury of speaking with a couple of students at Doherty Valley, one who's a junior and one who recently graduated, and they are these amazing young women. They're advocates. They're just amazing. One woman young woman who graduated last year, and she was one of the 2 women that organized the BLM march on Golden Gate, Tiana Day. Just amazing. And she was telling me about how, I was not that student that, had straight A's and, whatever. And so from how she talked, probably not the student that would have gotten that high SAT score to get into Stanford. But she offers so much to the world and has had the opportunity to be able to find her voice in a pretty short amount of time, short lifespan so far, right? And to be able to and got the skills, have the skills, which I firmly believe that a large part of that came from her education in San Ramon Valley, to be able to amplify her voice in a way that speaks volumes, right? And so I think that if we could, as the higher education starts to shift the model of how they assess, if we can at the secondary and primary level, if we can look at how we assess too, how we look at the outcomes of learning and how and what those what those look like in a way that it becomes more than just one score on a test, right? And I know that there's a lot more to getting into college than an SAT score.
No,
and,
absolutely.
Right. But I think that framework is in place at Doherty. I think it's just there needs to be a shift in the way that the outlook of how I'm not sure how to say it. How an SAT score, the value of the SAT score, there's a lot of value to it. It assesses kids in very specific ways that help, like you said, that help, kind of help to predict the outcomes in college and various things.
Which gets them into college, right?
And it gets them into college, and it allows the college to see this is what they know, and so this is how they're stepping foot into our university to see where, how they're going to achieve, right? So there's value in that, but I think there's also as much value in teaching a kid to have a voice, to have, that kind of social and cultural literacy, to be able to then, navigate while they're in college, navigate all of the new stuff that comes at you when you're in college that you had no idea was going to be a thing when you were in high school, right?
Just be able to think. Just teach somebody to think.
And so I feel like this whole idea of we need SATs. No, oh sorry, no.
You got the bump of shame. Doom.
We need SATs. No, they're bad. It's like this pendulum that's swinging, and it's either this or that. Well, let's look at all of it and make this great piece of pie, whatever, that kind of includes all the value that you get out of the SAT experience and what the colleges get out of that, but also all of the value that you get beyond that then the universities can take into account. And I know they do, but to create a sense of that more holistic kind of student that really, because I know, and you probably much more so than me, that there are kids that tests are just overwhelming, they're just hard,
Absolutely.
and there's an equity and just in the way that SAT scores are written, or SAT test questions are written, in terms of how, it's just there's an equities kind of built in that, just like there's an equities built into how a kid writes an essay and all the activities and the volunteerism that they did. There are kids that, even me when I was growing up, I didn't have time to volunteer for anything. I didn't, fortunately at that point, I just needed my ACT score and my GPA and went to a state school and I was golden, right? But
yeah, and I couldn't agree more that we need to, the point of high school is not just to create a college student, right? The point of high school really should be to, like you're saying, create a more world-class individual. And I'm an enormous advocate of that, and was absolutely on that warpath as well. I was in music, I was on 3 different sports teams, and I was doing all kinds of different academic things as well. And I had a paper route, and little things like that. But again, with you and I think very much agree on the value of creating a more well-rounded student and trying to, in some degree, at least on a community level, redefine what, that may be a little too broad, but at least between the two of us, acknowledge that the point of high school is not just to get you into college, but a lot of the people going to the schools in the San Ramon Valley say, yeah, Matt and Laura, that's fine. Like, good on you. You want to make world-class thinkers. How do I get into Cal now?
Yeah.
Because we've been working towards this quantitative measure to refine and polish and smooth it out so it's as perfect and pretty as possible. That has now been yanked away. So here my student is with a 4.2 GPA or a 4.3 or whatever it is. That's the only number they really have compared to, say Richmond or where I went to high school, Ignacio Valley High School. I'll speak about that. It's far easier to get a 4.3 at Ignacio Valley High School than it would be at Doherty Valley or Monte Vista or San Ramon or Cal High. If that's the case, that we're reduced down to one number and a couple other things, how do we distinguish our students? Because again, yes, I'll take it all. I'll take all of what you're saying. Let's make better people. Let's make world-class thinkers. Let's make people that get excited about diversity and integration. Let's do all of that. But how do we get them into college as well?
Yeah, I don't know the answer. I think that there needs to be a shift in the like a diversification of what the expectation is, I guess, so that you're not just, like you said, focusing on a number that is not equal across all schools, right? It's not a national number, a GPA. It's a school site number,
right?
And so and you're right, the SAT and the ACT, that's a national number, and there also is in that national number there's a lot of inequity, from a cultural standpoint, right? And from where those kids went to school. It's a national number, but if you're a student who, just personally for me, we lived in a suburb of Chicago, went to a very rigorous, school district, moved up to northern Wisconsin. I was a couple of grade levels ahead. I had been in, it was all of a sudden school was super easy for me and it wasn't as engaging. And I just, and then I kind of just flew under the radar and, graduated with like a 3.6 or something, right? I was just not,
Sure.
And then it wasn't until I got into college where I really felt like, oh, wow, this is exciting to me again. And, so I have a friend who I met after moving here, who also lived in that same suburb.
Oh, no kidding.
And we're the same age, we're in the same grade. And I didn't, and we went to the same elementary school, but I didn't know her. I didn't, whatever. Don't remember her name or anything. But seeing her, like listening to her experience of graduating from that high school, very rigorous. She had AP class opportunities. She had, multiple languages that she could look, find and learn about, all kinds of things that I didn't have in my little country school in northern Wisconsin, right?
Sure.
And, ended up getting her bachelor's, getting her master's, has a strong career in finance, all these things. And I think about, for me, I graduated from high school. I was happy. I had a great childhood. Went to school at University of Wisconsin. Go Badgers. Yay, everyone should go there.
Look at you.
Love that school.
I love Wisconsin. I love Madison, too.
Yeah.
I really wanted to go to law school there. It's such cool school. Beautiful. People are nice.
Yeah,
right? Like,
nice.
you just meet people.
Nice.
You're like, you're nice. Everyone's nice here. It was like, I was joking with my students the other day. Like, when's the last time you rolled through downtown Walnut Creek? And you're like, God, everyone is so nice here. They are just so welcoming. They're like, try never. Nobody has ever moved to Walnut Creek because everyone's so nice. Anyway, I'm sorry. Go Badgers.
Well, so I moved down to, I always knew I was going to go to a four-year college. It was always part of my thing, but I didn't really try real hard in high school. I think my senior year I had 2 academic classes, and I was in FBLA that was like 5th period, and then 6th and 7th period I went to a job that I really didn't go to, and I had 2 lunches. I mean, it was just like,
God, sounds delicious.
I had no motivation, right? I had no, and so then when I get to college, it was a big culture shock for me, and I found my passion, but it was switching my major, and I didn't have any direction, and I didn't have any, and I feel like that came from part of that. I mean, it was me, it was who I was, but it also came, and I consider myself a late bloomer, if you will, but it also came from the fact that the school that I went to, as much as I loved, my classmates and my teachers, it wasn't set up in a way for those of us that went off to college to really, really excel. It was set up for, that like top 25% to, get into a state school, and, of course the top, 5%, there were a few students that went to, bigger name private type
Sure.
schools, but it wasn't this, like, there wasn't that rigor, there also wasn't the pressure, there wasn't that. And so I don't know what I'm trying to say, but I feel like the point is that just those two comparisons of how where you go to school, oftentimes defines how what playing field you land on when you get out of school, right? Like where you end up. And so one of the great things about our community is that there is that, every high school has this high level of rigor that prepares our students to be able to, I know there's struggle with getting in and the numbers and all that stuff, but prepares, regardless of whether they're able to get in because of the quantity of students that are applying to Stanford or whatever, that student, once when they get there, they will be successful because our TK through 12 system has prepared them in a way that they're college ready, that they can take that apple that's given to them and they can, chew it up and spit it out and be whatever they want, right?
Right.
And so it's, I don't know what the point is that
This is, what's so interesting when you're talking to somebody like this? If the person listening to you actually listens and doesn't interrupt and doesn't interject, the probability that you're going to get lost in your own thought is so high.
Yes.
Because it's so, all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, this is not like a normal conversation where somebody's, giving you feedback immediately and keeping you on track.
Right.
You said something there that actually really struck a chord with me. You said that the last two periods that you had in high school, you went to a job. And whether or not you went to the job, whatever the job was, it doesn't really matter. But the thing I love about San Ramon is that you have tremendous schools. Again, Doherty Valley, third time, tremendous school, right? Very, very successful at teaching students in a way that gives them a very high probability of being successful in college and the years beyond. But it is a public school. And even though I'm an SAT tutor, I don't think that every student is perfect for a 4-year university. I think there is a lot that has gone in culturally to selling everyone on the idea that we got to take on this debt, you got to take these 4 years of lost income, you got to take this portion of your early adulthood and commit it to this very specific type of educational experience.
And it's your only option.
And it's your only option.
Yeah.
And the flip side of that is obviously I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's something I've done. I've been an athlete for my whole life, and including my adult life. And I have one of my friends in that we were training partners. He was a junior and senior in high school at the time. And I always asked him, like, hey, look, do you want to come to my SAT class? I'll help you for free. I'll help you with your essays. He said, I'm actually going into the pipe layers union, right? And so he went in because that's what his older brother and his dad did. And I was always traveling. We would go to these big tournaments and I would travel with them, and they were totally happy living in Walnut Creek. The dad made good money. The brother made good money. And this kid, Jordan, who is, I think, in his mid-20s now, he's working and making good money and very happy. And he started working there when he was 18. He started, taking his lunchbox and learning the trade and learning the craft, and he became part of the union. Now, Jordan was bright. I think Jordan absolutely could have gone to college if he wanted to, but that just wasn't his jam. He didn't see that life path. And I certainly didn't want to tell him it was better than what he had. And I just don't see, in the absence of having your dad be in the union and then your older brother successfully being in the union and living a happy, successful life, I don't see a lot of people talking about this very viable option. I mean, plumbers just an average plumber makes $125, $150 an hour. At least that's what the plumbing outfit charges for that plumber's work. So the reason that we have servicemen that cost so dang much is because they're in need. I mean, if everybody was a plumber, then plumbing would be, $40, $50 an hour, right? But that's not what's happening. We obviously have a lack of very skilled laborers. And as a public school district, we don't have the, hey, your last 2 periods, you're going to go to this job option. Do you think that's something that we should be investing in? Or do you think that the level that we're investing currently is fine, and that the stated goal that let's say you're elected, your constituents essentially have is, hey, I want my kid to go to college. I'm happy that you're working on this, plumbing guild program. That has nothing to do with me and my kid. I want my kid to go to college. This is a public school that serves a community. This is what the community's saying. So do you think, again, as a public school, we need to serve every student, or at least attempt to in some way? Or do you think that the opinion of four-year university being the only option is reflected broadly enough that we should continue to focus almost exclusively on that?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that I guess I want to say. The first thing that I want to point out is that when you were talking about that, you said he was bright enough to go to college, but he chose not to. I think that just from a cultural standpoint, we need to look at pathways other than a four-year college to not be about brain level, right? About intelligence, about anything like that. It needs to be about want and about passion and about that child's and oftentimes the family as well, because they're a big, when you're 17,
yes.
But their vision for their future, and to have that first benchmark be, are they smart enough for college or not? And if they're not, then what are the other choices, as opposed to what do you want to do? What do you want to be? What excites you? Okay, now let's make that happen. Because I believe that every person can build the skill sets to be what they want to be, who they want to be. Yes, I can't be a professional baseball player. I mean, I know that, but
why are you limiting yourself? Why are you doing this to yourself? God,
I would always
you
want to
lead our children, and you're already limiting yourself.
I know.
God,
Well,
how dare you?
I'm realistic.
Oh my God. I'm sorry. Keep going.
But I think that that just culturally we need to kind of shift what a good future looks like, right? Because you're right. I think that if you look back when I was growing up in northern Wisconsin, I keep saying that I'm going to pull out the cheese soon, but I'm
lactose intolerant. I need you to be appreciative of that. I'm sensitive to that.
I'm dairy free, actually. I don't drink beer either. It's
I was going to say I have some milk in the refrigerator if you'd like it, but anyway.
But I think that we need to so when I was growing up, it was a factory town, like the Uniroyal, they made tires, and in, I guess it was the 80s, the factory closed, or the union, but a lot of my friends had fathers that worked for the factory, and they were the kids that I was jealous of. They had the split level house with the 2-car garage and the, you know what I mean? I mean, I grew up on wood heat, for God's sake.
The split level house. It's like you get that nice corner lot,
exactly.
4 bedrooms, 3 baths, split level.
TV in the basement. I mean, gosh, could you imagine?
I wish we had basements. We don't have basements here. Like the best you can do in California is an air conditioned garage. But you go to Midwest, man, they have basements that are literally the footprint of the entire house in your basement.
No. So the house that we had in Delaware. So because we had owned when my husband and I first got married, we had a townhouse in Martinez and sold it and in 2004, which was the peak. And then we moved to France and rented, and then we moved to...
Wait, you sold in 2004, moved to France, lived a fabulous life, and then moved back.
And then moved to Delaware and got...
The Delaware move is the only thing that makes me feel better about this story. Yes, no, France was great, trust me. I bet it was.
So the 1,600 square foot townhouse in Martinez was the same price as including the full basement that had an entrance, was 3,500 square feet. So we had a basement that was huge, and we had little kids, right? And it was Delaware, and our yard was hilly, and it was winter and all that stuff. So our basement was essentially a daycare. Like I set it up. We had an au pair because I'm very entitled. No, it's just I had
well, you're Swedish. Of course you're entitled.
And she was Swedish. That's true. Yeah. No,
my God, we can't make this stuff up.
I had a 3.5-year-old, a 22-month-old, and twin 3-month-old. So I needed help.
Oh my
I'm not afraid to admit that I could not handle it. And I was working.
You had twins 19 months apart after your second.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yep. Yeah. And then the sticker was that we were living in France when Anais and the twins were born, and we had to move back to the States at the 2.5-month mark for the boys.
How was that plane flight?
Well, and then chicken pox was running through the kids.
God.
And when we went to book the tickets, and we were, the company was paying, so it was like Economy Plus or something, or business or whatever. And my husband was calling for the reservations, because back then that's kind of what you did. And the woman was like, I can't book this. You have 4 little kids and just the 2 of you. I need to talk to my manager. And we were like, and we had, my in-laws had come, and they had a plane tickets too, and they were going to be on the same flight, and we were all, so it was one adult to a kid.
Sure.
But we had to explain to the manager that
that
we're going to have enough adults and stuff. And then I shouldn't say this on recorded, but that my oldest.
How about I tell you I'll edit it out, but
okay.
I won't. But I won't.
No,
okay,
it doesn't matter. We're years away from it. I'm in another country now.
I'm a different person.
No, yeah, but so my oldest got he was in preschool, and he got, they call it varicella, the chicken pox. Mm-hmm. And I'd been giving him having him have the immunizations for the States, which are different than France. And in France, they kind of let the chicken pox just cycle through the preschool.
Laissez-faire.
Yeah, exactly. C'est la vie. And so he ended up getting, he didn't have it that bad, but because he had the immunization, but he ended up getting the chicken pox. And then the twins, who were, one of them at 7 weeks, he starts getting spots, and it was confusing because that's not supposed to happen, because they still have but because it was a different strain.
Oh,
so
no.
he still has scarring. It's a bummer. And so then we're getting ready to move, and we're at the airport, and the other twin, Dylan, he has his little hat on, and my mother-in-law was holding him, and she moves the hat along, and she's like, "Do you see this?"
Oh no!
So we actually carried the strain to Delaware, and so then on the plane,
you carried a French strain of the chicken pox to Delaware. I don't know what the statutes of limitations are, but how dare you?
Well, so then Anais, who had not been vaccinated, and she was like 22 months, I think, by the time we landed in Delaware.
You could have been the original pandemic.
I know.
That's too soon. We actually can't make that joke.
It is way too soon.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, everybody.
And so she got it, like, it was just horrible. Like, she had the, in her mouth and just on the bottom of her feet, and it was just awful. Yeah. So anyway, that was a fun move. This is my point. But the basement, let me tell you, I just want to make one point about the basement. So we had, at one point when the twins were, like 2 before we moved to Southern California, and we had gotten the kids through Craigslist. I got those ride-on, like the little Jeeps, the John Deere little Jeep things, and the little like Barbie bug, whatever. And we had those in the basement.
Oh, so you had enough room for like the Power Wheels?
We had enough room for them to, and we had a swing, and we had a ladder, and we had a little craft area, and we had a back, what they called the Ariel's Grotto, the back.
Oh my God. I have the 3 boys trapped inside, and I think we have like 1,500 square feet. And look, I'm not complaining. I'm happy. I love my little house, but the last 3-4 weeks where they can't even go outside, and I don't have a big backyard, but it's bigger than hanging out in my living room. Oh my gosh.
I know,
especially with everybody doing the homeschooling and all of that. Gosh, man. We've covered so much ground. It's just, oh my goodness. Here's something interesting that I've heard a lot. There are parents with the current superintendent. There are parents that are displeased right out of the blocks because they say, look, why are we paying this superintendent so much? Right? And it's a fair question because, hey, look, the compensation is substantial. But one criticism is that the superintendent now is making 20% more than his previous employment. And they're like, what? you're paying him so much, and it's a 20% step up.
Right.
What do you think about that?
Well, I'm sure from the headhunter and the board, and from their point of view, it's like we need to get the best of the best, and the only way to do that is to increase the salary by this much because it's the going rate. Well,
but it was and let me be really clear, it wasn't an increase off of the old superintendent.
Oh, okay.
It was an increase from the current superintendent. At the current superintendent's former employment, he was making 20% less than he is right now at this employment.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. I know he, was in Canada, and there's a different cost of living.
I know what you're talking about.
There's, and there's, you have, a different level of government benefit and stuff. And the cost of living in California, and especially in this area, is much higher. So, I mean, I think that there's justification. I don't know. I think that the question should be, does the district have the money to pay that, because that's the bottom line. I think if someone asked me to move from Toronto to the Bay Area, and I don't know if he has kids, I don't know, with a family, and I would need to know that I was making enough money to be able to pay my rent or my mortgage.
Sure.
I don't need $400,000 to buy, a house in Blackhawk, or whatever, to pay for a mortgage in Blackhawk. But I need to. I know, just like what I said with the townhouse versus the house in Delaware. I mean, and even for us, the struggle of moving from Southern California to up here was actually a bigger shift for us economically and financially than it was moving from Delaware to Southern California, which is interesting because you don't really, when you live here and you've been here, you don't really have a full understanding of what it's just what it is, right? But everything from milk to mortgages is more than 20% more. So it's hard for me to say that there isn't a reason for it that has value. I think that I don't know what the salary is. So I think if I had that number, I might have a different opinion. But in terms of for him, a 20% increase moving from Toronto,
somewhere out of the
wherever,
area,
to the Bay Area is I think is kind of necessary. I
right.
mean, it's to have a living wage here. It's just different than,
Right, and it's difficult. I mean, obviously, it's difficult to say it's appropriate or not without knowing specifics. But that was always my feeling as well, which is, hey, we don't know where he was coming from. And whenever I apply for a job, I've actually never applied for a job. This is all I've ever done. I know, but like back in 2004, when I was graduating from Cal and I was a tutor at Cal, I was getting something like $10 an hour to tutor the other Cal students. And I was very happy with this. And I left and got my first private tutoring gig because I was intending to go to law school. But while I waited to hear back from the law schools, I started private tutoring. And I think that first person paid me like $60 an hour because that was the going rate for a tutor of my expertise and whatever it was at the time. And they enjoyed my employment. They kept me on for a long time, and the kid liked it. So I was worth it to them. But at no point did somebody say, okay, well, how much were you making before you came to work for me? Because if you were making $10 an hour, I will give you a 10% raise, so you're going to get 11. It was always, hey, what's this job worth? And with that in mind, right, we obviously have our teachers that are compared to other areas making more or very close to the top as far as teachers go. Okay, and then we have our executive team that's making a very good, kind of analogous, like we have a lot of income going to those people, and again, to attract the best and the brightest. All of this on the backdrop of being one of the lowest funded school districts in the state. What can be done about that? What can be done about that on the legislative side, and what can be done about that on the community side to ensure we don't have an $8 million deficit that keeps growing, to ensure that we don't get taken over by the state, to ensure that we cannot just strip down our world-class schools to the point where they're marginally graduating students, let alone creating these world-class citizens that you and I both want.
Right. Well, just my experience of moving from Delaware to California, and just the drastic I mean, it was like I said, it was shocking that the amount of funding at, in a state that is the sixth largest economy in the world or something,
Right.
And it's obvious that it's a funding issue and it's a priority issue with the state at the state level, and I know that I'm getting a lot of backlash for this, but Prop 15 is a low-hanging fruit. I mean, that will bring to our school district, $18.5 million a year to our school district.
Prop 15 is?
That's the prop where they roll back some of the loopholes in Prop 13, so businesses.
On the commercial and multifamily side.
Yeah, and small businesses that make less than $3 million in revenue a year will not be affected. And then there's also policies within that set up a framework so that there's a way for them to be able to roll it through, so that you have to, I think it's every 3 years. There's
you get reassessed or something.
Yeah. So it's basically asking a Chevron who has that has a lot of commercial, a lot of real estate,
right,
to be able to pay their fair share in property taxes, and that's
now,
for the schools. So
would that money stay local?
Yes, yeah. I asked that specific question. So because part of the issue that we have with funding is that, from the state standpoint, that there's buckets of money that have to go for specific things, and it's it's mandated by the state, and so oftentimes the school districts, their hands are kind of tied about how they can spend money, and there's reasons for that, but there's also you lose some of the flexibility that you really need when you're working in a budget that's so incredibly tight. And so with Prop 15, the money goes to the county, and then the county doesn't dictate how the school districts pay, so it doesn't go to the state like it
doesn't get redistributed. Yeah.
Right. It goes to the county, and then the county splits it up. And my understanding is that it's I can't be quoted on this because I don't know.
But your point is that Prop 15 does liberate some local funds by increasing taxation on multi-million-dollar companies like Chevron, right next to Whole Foods.
And it's just chump change for them, and it's going to make a huge difference. And it is low-hanging fruit, And I say it's going to make a huge difference because I feel like it is, because we are on this, in this space where everything is going to make a huge difference, because everything's so nickel and dimed and everything's so tight. But I think that after, Prop 15 passes, that the state needs to look at how they are allocating they need to find more money, because there is money, right? They need to find the money to prioritize schools, and then they need to look at how they're allocating it in a way that, I completely believe that schools that have, like the Title I schools that have those higher needs, need to have more to be able to, you think about a lot of other school districts where they don't have the same level of parent engagement, and the burdens on the parents are great in a different way, in a way that they can't necessarily manage. And so, you need to, as a government, you need to support that, and you need to provide those services for those students and those families. But you also need to have our district, which doesn't need that necessarily because of our demographics, doesn't need that specific extra support. We need at least a baseline of support that allows us to have, current textbooks, to have, to not have to nickel and dime every single situation. It's like it's public school. We need to fund public school. I mean, that's just the bottom line.
Right. I mean, again, I went to Ignacio Valley High School, and there was a huge population of that was English second learners, and single family or single parent households, or households where both parents were working. I mean, I grew up with a single mom, and so again, and she was working, and so it is very difficult. So I do have sympathy for that situation, which is, look, if you are true public education, and you have two schools, and one is made up of 50% of people who need really intensive English help, and the other doesn't, well, then you have to provide that kind of stuff. But the flip side of it also is, okay, what if everybody at Doherty Valley needs a calculus teacher? right? And again, the equity that we talk about usually becomes equity on the lower end, right? What are we doing for the people that are special needs? What are we doing for the people that are ESLs? But I think there needs to be some kind of balance with what are we doing for those students who run out of math in high school. They've tapped the resources that they have as far as math. Now they have to start going to DVC, which of course the school likely will make time for them to go to, but it's now on the student's dollar.
Yeah.
And of course, DVC and a lot of those junior colleges or the extension over in San Ramon is, those are great resources, but to some degree it's outsourcing the higher end education.
Yeah, and the PLI, which the idea of it I think is good, but I'm experiencing with high school students the high cost. Like it's so my son is doing sign language at DVC. That's great. That's easy. We live right near the San Ramon annex. It's awesome. My daughter took chemistry, and we did it through Apex, and that was the cheapest we could find, and it was like $600, which is fairly inexpensive. But we pulled it from our 501 account. It's like how do we make this work? In the middle of a pandemic,
right? $600 for chemistry is cheap when compared to other college courses. $600 is not cheap compared to high school chemistry.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, just the textbooks for these for a college class. I mean, you could run a couple $100.
Right. And so it's again this kind of idea of, in our school district, there's an assumption that the families, the parents, and small businesses in the community will pony up and fill in the gaps of funding, right?
Sure.
And we want, because we want what's best for the kids, and we want to make sure, and we're going to prioritize, and we're going to shave off things so that we can make sure that our kids get the best education and that they have that smaller class size. So we're going to fund to get the assistant and whatever it is, right?
Sure.
And but I think that the issue is that because the state funding system has been able to rely so heavily on school districts like ours that have people that can fill in the gaps, and so to create the equity, they shave off, I talked about that in something else, it's an analogy I keep using, but they shave off underneath the higher level school districts to be able to kind of, they shave the money off of the bottom to, and so instead of taking, that baseline and bringing everyone else to that, they shave to get, to equalize it, right?
Well, I mean, look, it's a very dark analogy, but the populace will go along with it until they don't go along with it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you see that a lot in the social unrest that we've been experiencing.
Yeah.
And I think the same kind of thing, at least to some degree, stands true for public resources like money for public education, right? Like this district can keep getting its budget cut until the district says, no, you can't keep cutting this. And the parents obviously wanting what's best, and myself included. I mean, every time there's a fundraiser, when my kids were going to Green Valley, it's like, okay, let's whatever the suggested donation was, okay, let's do it. And then we just kept getting hit and hit and hit and hit. And when it's explained, it's like, well, this is why we keep asking. We as parents, my wife and I, a year or two ago when we were having this conversation, we were very frustrated with the school. And then we got frustrated with the school district. And then at some point, you have to realize, look, the district is not in control of this.
No,
what you should be upset about is the state and the way we're doing it. But again, we dutifully wrote the checks because we said, well, that's above our pay grade.
Right. Well, and the other thing that I don't know that people really talk about is the inequity of the different school sites within a district, and how one, like elementary is I think a better example because it's more smaller groups, but and I'll use the example of Southern California when all 4 of my kids were in elementary school, and they were at 2 different elementary schools because the twins were in a different program, and the difference in the level of funding, the schools were 2 miles apart, and it was Laguna Niguel is a lot like San Ramon and Danville in terms of socioeconomic level, and the amount of fundraising was, I think the one school probably fundraised about half of the other school. in full. And so that meant the class sizes, the number of paras and assistants, the amount of fundraising, individual fundraising asks that had to happen, all that stuff, because there was a different type of parent cohort, I guess, if that makes sense, because it wasn't necessarily that the houses that fed into that school, in fact, they were actually, probably dollar for dollar, the value was maybe a little bit lower, but it was more the groundswell of engagement of the parents into providing those services for their child, right, relative to the engagement of the parents at the other school in really finding the nickels and the dimes and putting them in the school. And so then that creates, then you're looking at a class size. My daughter had, and I shouldn't be talking about another district, but she had a class size in 4th grade that was 37 kids for one teacher.
Wow.
That's, whereas the other school, they were at that like 35 classroom, that the parents were able to fund a TA that came in and was there, for the full day. And
so same size, same number of kids in the physical room, but multiple adults.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we talk a lot about, and it's important to talk about the inequities across different school districts, but I think we need to look in this model of parents funding the public education in a school district. We need to look at where the inequities lie with that, and how that's an issue.
Gotcha. If I may, we're almost at 2 hours. Time has flown here. It's like a black hole. We just start talking, it goes by, and I know you have other things like your twins. So here's a last question for you, and I really don't mean this to be canned or cliche or just silly, but why you, right? So I know why. It's obvious you have this passion and this drive and you have experience, but if anybody's still listening at 2 hours, why you over Kumar or Scott? What is it about Laura that makes the difference?
So I want to know about everyone. I want to listen to people, and I want to hear their stories, and I want to take that information, and I know that I'm not going to make everyone happy with my decisions, and I know that it's going to be hard, but I want to bring everyone together. Like, I feel like there's this, there are these walls that are built up. We talked about it earlier, and this is about our kids, and we all want what is best for our kids. Why are we fighting? Can't we just sit at the table and, there needs to be a voice of reason that's sitting there saying, I hear you. I also hear this person and I hear this person. So let's talk about it this way. Let's reframe it in a way that we can fully get to the meat of it. And then let's make sure that we communicate that to our stakeholders in a way that they understand, because we all want to have a strong, it's a strong and supportive academic environment for our kids. And if we're, and we all want the same thing. And I feel like it's just everyone is turning outside of the solution as opposed to looking at each other and working together. So, I truly value the perspectives of other people. I think throughout my life, I've seen my perspective, and I've seen the difference in someone else's perspective, and I think that that's as valuable, if not more valuable than mine. Me knowing their perspective is more valuable than the knowledge of my perspective, because it's new and it's different, and it's gonna shift. It's going to allow for creativity and decision making, and shift the way that we approach the problems and the challenges. Knowing how other people are approaching them, and I think that that's missing right now.
Right, and that's exactly what you were talking about with regard to, say, a math department.
Yeah.
Right, like you need to see different people's experiences, different people's strategies, different people's, fixes for certain problems, and understand different problems that you may have not considered.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, listen, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. This has been fantastic. Any last notes? You want to plug a website or?
Yeah. But my website's Vote Laura Bratt, and that's BRATT.com. And then I'm on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
You're
and the
plugged
handle,
in. You
and
are
the handle
plugged
is,
in.
The handle is Vote Laura Bratt, same.
Wonderful.
So yeah, I'm just plugging along. We do have an all candidate forum next Wednesday.
Oh, wonderful!
It's exciting. Yeah.
And where can people watch that or hear that or?
It's being hosted by the San Ramon Valley Unified PTSA and the DanvilleSanRamon.com publication. I think it's going to be live streamed. I'm assuming YouTube, and then they'll probably post it on their Facebook pages. I know I'll have it posted on my Facebook page as well.
Wonderful.
And it's from 6 to 8 next Wednesday, and
Gotcha.
like all 6 of us will be there. So it's 2 hours. It's going to be
that's going to be something.
quite the show, I think.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting, especially with Area 2, I think.
Yeah, Area 2's Zone 2 is something else.
Yeah.
It's good.
good.
It'll be
It's
good.
good.
I spoke with Greg and Shelley, and I'm speaking with
good. Yeah.
Priscilla on Monday. And yeah, man, that's a big one.
Yeah, and it's actually it's really exciting that people, regardless of the the undercurrent of frustration and all that stuff, it's wonderful to know that my kids are in a district where there's so much stakeholder engagement, not just parent engagement. I mean, it's an amazing thing. I think
People are
it's
invested.
Exciting. Yeah,
people care.
Exactly,
which
and
is
that's the bottom line, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for caring.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks, everybody.